Good morning and welcome to the Haven Tree Parent Podcast, where we get a chance to talk about something that's important to us and hopefully yourself before the kids wake up.
Today we are in another new location. We had just moved to our previous room, which was also our guest room, and then found out we were pregnant. So that has to become the nursery. So we had to find a new good location that's undisturbable from the children, which you know how hard that is. So obviously this is still a work in progress because it's pretty plain and boring right now, but that's okay since mostly we're just talking.
Yeah, it's a space to grow into.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I'm actually really excited about our topic today. Today, we're going to talk about some different cultures that use baby wearing or strollers and what those communities value about the way that they transport their baby. I was going to say store their babies, but that's terrible. You don't store them.
Yeah.
But transport their babies.
Okay, so like you said, today we're going to talk about strollers and baby wearing to see what different cultures are doing to, I don't know, carry around their infants and not store them, but take care of them. So one of the interesting things in our research that we found out about was that in Scandinavia or different communities over in Europe,
Denmark in particular was the one that I kept finding.
Denmark.
But a lot of the Scandinavian countries are similar, we'll say.
Right. And they prefer, I think they prefer strollers. I would imagine they still have some sort of baby carrying devices if they wanted. But because when they go out to a meal or to grocery shop or whatever, they'll put their strollers outside of the store with their baby to get some time in the fresh, cold air.
Okay, so this is wild because when I first found, I was like, there's no way. But it's literally like you see pictures of like in amusement parks where it's like you can't have strollers in the going up the ride, and so you see like this line of strollers off to the side of like the amusement park, and like we've had to do that before, and then I'm like, I need to grab like anything off of the stroller that someone might swipe or like whatever.
Right, yeah.
You're
at Kings Island or some amusement park.
And so, but it's like there's like pictures of like just lines of strollers outside of a store like in downtown, but they all have like their babies sleeping in them. Like I was like, this is, I don't know. It was wild to me.
Yeah. So obviously we're not the only ones that discovered this or talking about it. So the research was interesting on that factor, and people had the debate is, there's health benefits to it.
Of
as
letting
long as
babies sleep outside.
Yeah. The fresh air is good for them, and it helps them get a deeper sleep because they're not freezing, but they're well wrapped up, hopefully, and warm enough that the fresh air is still good for them versus being in a store where people are coughing or whatever. So, and obviously right now with the pandemic going on, it makes sense that you don't want to take your kids into any places.
This is also funny because I like to sleep cold. I need a fan on. I want it to be cold. If it's hot, I can't sleep. And which is why we only do camping in the beginning of spring and in the late fall, because I cannot sleep if it's hot. And this was a point of contention early in our marriage because Josh was like, if I sleep and it's cold, I'm going to get sick.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you won't. It's ridiculous. So obviously the Danish
she's woken up with, I've had a hat on a few times.
It's ridiculous.
Or socks on or
ridiculous. So, but the Danish, believe exactly the opposite, that letting their baby sleep in the cold air, because Denmark and most Scandinavian countries are colder than it is in Ohio. They're farther north, right?
I believe so. I'd have to look at it because I can't.
So, but they do believe that there's health benefits to sleeping outside in the cold because viruses and bacteria, prefer to live in warmer weather. That's why we refrigerate food, is because the bacteria can't grow in the cooler temperature. So, and they do this, they let put their babies in strollers to sleep outside at home and at daycares too, because they believe so strongly in the benefits of sleeping outside.
Right. I did look up one case. I wanted to see if any babies had ever frozen. And I wanted to see if there's a research article on that. And they actually, I think a Russian mother had left her child on their balcony for fresh air and the benefit of getting a deeper sleep in the cold. But it was too long of a time and the baby wasn't well wrapped up. And so there was a loss there. But I didn't find very many more reports. That was the only one this year in 2020 in January.
Yeah.
So, I mean, January.
Yeah, Russia in January.
It's going to be pretty cold.
Well, but so like we even did this at one point in the United States. They made like
the window boxes.
Yeah, like the baby window cages. Like, you know, like if you look on Pinterest, you'll see like catios, I think, where like you make little outdoor enclosures that your cat can go into.
Right.
And it's sort of the same thing for babies. You'd be able to like put them outside to sleep.
Right.
So it's something that even we did once upon a time.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously as technology improves and things get better, people have started using like baby monitors, and so they're in the store monitoring. They're just not outside with their baby. So as they're, you know, there's still the technology benefiting that tradition of that ability. And I think in the case, like I said, with that mom, there was just, I don't know what happened there. So the baby wasn't well wrapped or checked on. I don't know.
And there is some science that backs that up. I mean, you know, one of the things that we kept coming across with the baby co-sleeping and SIDS prevention is that, you know, one of the big risk factors is baby getting too hot can definitely be a big contributor of SIDS. And so having the baby sleep in a cold environment not only would logically protect would have some like biological protection as far as decreasing viral or bacterial infections, but also would ensure that the baby's not getting too hot. Obviously, you're not talking about putting a naked baby outside in the cold to sleep.
Right.
You know,
No, and
as you point out.
Yeah, no, and most of the research it said, like, make sure, you know, you're doing the right things, you have the right gear, and, like, you're not just putting a baby outside. You are making sure that they are well wrapped up, and you're just trying to leave them enough, you know, room to breathe, basically, and get that fresh air.
Right.
But, yeah, I think
because fresh air does good.
Yeah.
And there's, lots of scientific evidence that demonstrates that.
So I think the last thing I was going to say was it's an interesting study. Like I told Katie, I was like, I'm going to find a way that I can get fresh air to like ventilate to our new baby, to like bring it in, like blow it over her face so she'll still get fresh air, or he'll get fresh air, and then we'll be good. And
he's already convinced it's a girl. He wanted Obi to be a boy desperately. We both are, though. Pretty much everybody except for Josiah is on team girl at this point. Just as a, you know, we'll see. Like in a few weeks, I could like have to eat my words, but pretty much we're all on team girl. This pregnancy is very much like my girl pregnancies. So we've been calling it her, much to Sai's chagrin, although he calls the baby her also a lot and says, where is she going to sleep?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And Jay's mad that it's not out yet. She said, why is it still in there?
I know, every day she comes in. Is the baby still in your belly? Yes. It's going to be a while. Anyway,
sorry. Obviously, we've had kids throughout the winter months as well, and I think that's one of the always weirdest parts for me is trying to figure out how to keep them warm and not overheated, because then you pull them out of the back of the car from coming home from church or whatever, and they're like sweating, and you just feel awful because you're like, I had you too dressed up, too much more, because I was prepping, you know, for being outside, and now I was in the car with the blowing heater, and now you're like this little baby is just a sweating mop. So
pick it up that thing like a drippy baby.
I hate that. So hopefully I probably should have learned some tips on how to like wrap a baby and not make them overheat in the winter months. But you know, I'll figure that out one of these times. So.
Yeah. So one of the other things that I kind of just looked up. So interestingly, I guess the other specific culture that we're going to be talking about is Kenyan tradition and their perceptions on baby wearing, and that's particularly just because that was what I found readily and easily available. But there actually was a Kenyan woman, who had moved to Denmark. I guess her husband was Danish or something, and so I found kind of a thing that just was like her talking about why, you know, the Danes leave their babies outside in the stroller. And that in some ways it was a tradition that she had adopted in some ways. And so one of the things that she said that I thought was really interesting is she said, one of the big differences is Danish automatically assume that nobody's going to hurt a baby. Like, a baby is innocent and a baby. Like, so there's just kind of this cultural assumption, like nobody would hurt a baby. Whereas Americans kind of have this perception of like, that the world is dangerous and the world is dangerous. I mean, like you look around right now, it's like, yeah, the 2020 kind of sucks. Like, but so we kind of have this attitude that like children need to be protected from the world as long as possible and things like that. And so there's really a cultural difference there. And, and that's seen in other things as well, where, you can point to articles that talk about, Danish children being allowed to or encouraged to explore their limitations in like outdoor play and climbing on, playgrounds that we would consider like dangerous or different things like that. And so there is it is a cultural belief that continues beyond like infancy, where, the Danish encourage independence and free thinking and believe that benefits the child, which I think we would agree with. We tend to be very free range parents in a lot of things.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think when I was reading about it or whatever, I don't remember what article it was or why it was even included. It said some study in the UK said that kids spend less time outside than some prison yard inmates or something. So like,
right.
the prisoners are getting more yard time than some of these kids are. So, which I mean, with all the technology and everything and educational benefits of, I don't know, learning with groups of people, makes sense at some degree, but.
Yeah. But then, she kind of like had 7 just basic reasons why, that's what they did there. And
what is Punzel doing? I
don't know. Her thoughts were, it's what people do culturally. That's, that's just what they do. Shops and restaurants are small and there's not room for a stroller. In Denmark, it's safe. They talk about the fact that there's been only like 3 baby abduction cases in the last several years.
Yeah, and I didn't catch anything on that. Like
so
I was interested to see if there was any, negative reporting or whatever. So,
and because it's, been a cultural thing for so long, strangers, will kind of watch out for babies and let you know if your baby's crying. But then, as Josh mentioned too, there's also a lot of technology now of like baby monitors that attach to your stroller and, connect to your phone. And so you're always kind of like watching,
yeah.
That as well.
And there's even some, I think, that have like the thermal ability where it like tells you what the baby's temperature is.
Right.
So,
babies sleep better and longer outside. So if your baby's asleep, there's no reason, to, wake them up to take them into the store.
It's always the worst part. You're like, I don't want to take this baby in. It's sleeping.
Right.
You can't leave it outside because someone's going to call the cops.
Right. So there is kind of that benefit of like, and obviously I think that that's sort of an understood top part of this, that, you're not leaving like a screaming baby outside.
Yeah.
And I don't think that like Danish culture is advocating for that.
I think if your screaming kid wakes up everybody else's baby, you're going to be in trouble.
Right.
That's
so I think, but, and
you
that's
better
kind
be out
of
there
like,
quick.
refer back to the last point of like a stranger will like walk in the store and be like, hey, somebody's baby out here is crying. Like that's just a very like normal thing to do, I guess.
I wonder if you have, it's probably ridiculous, like license plates, people come in and are like, this lights are on at this license plate. This stroller 570.
The purple stroller with the 3 wheels, whatever. They sleep outside at home and daycare too, which, we had kind of talked about. And
I think one of the articles I had a picture of like they slept on this, like, I don't know, it was like a playground haystack area. Like kids had like a board and a sleeping bag, and like they were dressed warm, and it was like these 4 and 5 year olds that were napping outside. So it's like, I'd take a nap outside. That'd be awesome. Have a hammock, whatever.
Because the stores are small, parents can still see the baby from inside the store. There were some interviews that talked about the fact that like parents would say, like, obviously, if I'm going to leave the stroller out here, I'm going to pick like a window seat or sit out on the patio so that I can keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're just like abandoning their baby outside. And, and of course there's a lot of talk too about like once the baby's old enough to like sit up and move around in the stroller, it's not safe to leave them because they could like make the stroller roll away or like different things like that too. So obviously this is for a very specific amount of time. It's not just kind of like a free for all to just like leave your kid out, so I don't want us to, give that impression at all. I think that they do it with a very particular set of parameters and for a very specific reason that does make a lot of sense. It's just very different. So totally, I don't know, totally interesting and, like I said, like hard to kind of wrap my head around at first. That was something that people did anywhere in the world. So, yeah. But it is cool that like there's a place in the world where it's safe to do that. Like as a parent, I wish that, we lived in a community that was safe like that too, Right. So, because it does make sense. In the United States, CPS would be called like I did find an example of like a Danish American couple that left their baby outside while they went to eat in a restaurant. And CPS was called and, it was kind of a big case for a while because of the cultural differences there.
Yeah.
But it is something that, it would be nice to live in a place where it was safe to do that. And have like, sort of that it takes a village mentality of like other people just instinctively sort of watch out for what's going on. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of time that doesn't happen anymore in our communities, in our country. So depending on where you live, I guess. I think there are probably some places that still do that. But
yeah.
So with all that said, we're going to kind of shift gears then and talk about the research that I did. So this wasn't intended to be a debate necessarily, but it kind of was like, it kind of did end up being like Josh's topic versus mine. And I think that that's particularly...
That's really what we should call this, Josh versus Kate.
I think that particularly, the reason for that is because strollers are viewed so negatively by the other culture that we'll talk about. So a lot of this... I'm just going to read to you some of the things that mothers said about strollers. So these, like I said, are all Kenyan mothers who had no interest in using a stroller ever. So they said, a stroller is a cold cage with useless rattles. Strollers are an affront to a time-honored tradition. In Africa, we carry our children so they feel loved. Imagine being stuffed into a contraption and pushed around town like some kind of pet. Our children are carried or walk with us. They can't just sit like lumps. For a child, the love will not be there if the child is cooped up in such an antisocial device. A Kenyan child psychiatrist said, putting a child in a stroller is the ultimate of pushing a baby away from you. The baby, worn on the back, provides warmth and comfort, allowing to feel safer and be happier. So it's very obvious from the quotes that it's not just a matter of convenience or lack of ability. In Kenya, a lot of British and Western devices and ideas are becoming available, and Kenyan mothers are not having it. And it's interesting because, pediatricians and child psychologists, like I said, are very much on board with that. African pediatricians, this isn't a specific quote, but they believe that it can cause damage to the relationship between the mother and child. And that is even something that American and European doctors are starting to look at and point to. The fact that excessive use of strollers can be correlated with childhood obesity and things like low self-esteem as they grow later in life. So there's definitely some very strong anti-stroller sentiments.
Right. Well, and there's one of the things I think there's like the bald spot from like the back of the head or the flattening of the skull if you're like laying on their backs for too long or whatever.
So, when we had Adri, I was really kind of worried about carrying her too much. I was concerned that, it would spoil her, or not even spoil her necessarily, but just kind of set up unreasonable expectations as she got older. And she would expect to be carried for longer and not allowed to sort of grow and learn and become independent, which, as I said, we really value our kids' independence and ability to be independent.
And I think they have a good mix of wanting to be independent and wanting to like have that close snuggle time that we always have mentioned about when we were doing our other series. So,
but then at the same point, there's lots and lots of research that talks about the fourth trimester now, which, if that's something that you're not familiar with, and you have a baby or you're expecting a baby, I would definitely recommend looking into. But basically, the idea is, when the baby is born, it doesn't mean automatically that they're like ready to make this transition into the very strange world. And so baby wearing as much as possible is a very natural way to ease babies into that transition. Baby wearing also, so it, improves baby's sleep, makes life easier for mom. It can improve the ability to breastfeed, especially on the go, depending on what kind of carrier you have. We ended up with one that worked really well for me, that I was able to nurse the baby while I was, unloading the dishwasher or dealing with the other kids. So that, I think I got really into baby wearing once we had Kenzie. Before that, it was kind of like we had a baby carrier if we were going to go out. I used one a lot with Sai because we went to the midwifery conference in Denver when Josiah was just a couple weeks old. And so I wore him there because it was just easier. Being in a conference setting, it was difficult to, try to figure out how to use a stroller, take that on a plane. And so I did wear him there. But I think that's like really the only time, other than like if we would go to the zoo or something like that. And then it was often one of those bigger like hiking backpack kinds of contraptions. Mm-hmm. But with Kenzie, I really did start baby wearing more, as much as possible, really. And part of that was just necessity of needing to be able to take care of the other kids and take care of the baby, But then as I did it and tried it, I realized and saw the benefits myself of how much easier it made life, and just she just, and part of this is just her personality. She just was a lot happier baby. So it was something that just kind of became then very natural for us to do. Now I think on the flip side of that, we've also used strollers a lot. We've also used kid leashes, which I know lots of people don't like, but there was a time. That
wasn't a big thing. It was like a phase thing.
So. Well, right. So, but there was a time where I had 5 under 5 and I had to go places still. And so Kenzie and Ellie were less than a year old. And so they had to go in a stroller because I couldn't wear or carry both of them easily. And then I had Jamie, who didn't talk at all and would go to anybody that smiled at her and would just walk away with them,
Right.
And then I had Sai, who thought it was really fun to hide. And then Adri was the only one that would stay nearby. And so
and always the one that's like, Why is it quiet? Why isn't anybody talking? I'm going to talk.
Yeah. And so it wasn't safe for me to take them anywhere without, having them
Hold hands.
Tied to me, more or less,
stay within range. Yeah.
And so Kenzie and Ellie were in the stroller, and Jay and Cy had backpack leashes that were tied to the stroller, and Adria was allowed to walk because she demonstrated that she was able to. But, it was definitely a safety thing. And then as they got older, the babies wanted to walk too. And so I made like a little daycare leash that had, hand holders on it. And so they each had like a little loop to hold onto. And they knew that like if they couldn't demonstrate that they could do that, we would go back to the leash,
Yeah.
And I did, at least one of them in particular, I had to releash sometimes because they were not able to demonstrate that they were responsible enough to hold on to their spot in line. So I definitely think that there's a lot of benefit to baby wearing. I think that it's benefits moms too, because it's a lot easier. But at the same point, I also think strollers are necessary. I think even maybe sometimes leashes are necessary. I think it really depends on like knowing your kid. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Oh, I was just going to say it sort of feeds into our next conversation or our next episode where we talk about.
You can say what it is. Yeah, it's okay.
On our next episode where we talk about potty training.
Yeah, which is going to be interesting.
So, because having that closer connection with your kid, where they're constantly with you, is benefiting in some cultures, and others it might not be.
So I think that it really is a balance. I think that, if you, as much as you're able to baby wear, you absolutely should. I have a dear friend that, has a lot of back issues. And so baby wearing was not something that she could do. And I would never say like, wow, you're damaging your baby by putting her in a stroller instead of.
You can't still sit with them and
right, like so there's lots of alternatives. I would
just means
say
you're not gonna be standing like I did with Adri and like walk circles behind the couch because she just wanted that the whole day. So
I will say that I do think that we can overuse strollers. I've definitely seen like 10-year-olds sitting in a stroller that are chunky and could use exercise. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I think I understand.
Like, I've seen that before, and I just think like that kid is way too big to be in a stroller.
Yeah.
And that kid needs to, get more outside time than the prison yard inmates or whatever, right? Like,
and I think I remember seeing or hearing about a story about one of the moms at work. She was complaining about some kid. She was with her daughter. She's like 7 or 8. And she saw another mom pushing her 7 or 8-year-old in a stroller. And the girl was sitting there with her legs crossed and like drinking a sippy cup or something. And the mom was like, what? My daughter's walking because she's old enough.
Right. I know. I can't imagine like Adri riding in a stroller. Like just now on the flip side of that, it's not a very fair judgment for me to make because I have no idea. Like that kid could be developmentally delayed. That kid could, be recovering from a surgery and not be able to walk right now. I just
played
like
15 soccer games and I was ready to be done.
And as far as like being overweight, there was a point in time, there were several points in time where Kenzie looked like she needed more exercise outside. And that was not at all the case. She was on steroids. Yeah. So she puffed up like a balloon, know?
Yeah.
And if somebody saw Ken's and thought like, man, those parents that are overweight need to, be more active with their kid because they're setting her up for a life of obesity, like I would have wanted to punch him in the face because it had nothing to do with her activity level.
Right. No. I mean, they're super active. Yeah.
So it's not fair of me to say like, but I think, sort of the idea of like, we've seen that before and we've had those thoughts, however unkind they may be. But with that said, there is certainly that concern of leaving your kid in a stroller.
You don't know the circumstances, like you said.
Right. So it's not fair to judge that circumstance. But I do think that strollers are a great tool, but they can be used inappropriately, I guess was kind of my point.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to say about this, and we'll kind of wrap it up, is that this is not just, baby wearing isn't just for infancy. Kenyan mothers will wear their children up until like age 4 when they're able to. which is crazy. Like Kenzie just turned 4.
I mean, I still carry Kenzie around.
Oh, I carry
and the
Kenzie
kids
around
love
all
it.
the time.
I always do like a fusion thing where like I hold baby and one of the other kids, and they think it's fun. And they want to try me to pick up all 3 or 4 of them, and I try to do that. But
and I will still. I mean,
for 50 seconds.
Adri's turning 8 in a few days. Like, and I still carry her as much as I can. And she thinks it's hilarious. But like, like I am going to carry her until I physically can't, and there's lots of like, you look on Facebook, be like, imagine that one day you picked your child up and you put him down for the last time. And like, you're like, oh, that's awful, whatever. But like, I still, as much as I can, like I'll carry them to bed. Like I carry them in the house if it's late, whatever. But this woman talked
Unless they're
about,
buckled in their seat and they can't get out.
oh gosh, don't even go there.
We
had an incident the other day.
We'll save it.
So this mom had moved to the States or to Europe, and her grandmother still lived in Kenya, and her 4-year-old had always been very independent, and was suddenly like asking to be carried a lot, was very temperamental, having a lot of tantrums, things like that. And so, the mom ended up talking to her grandmother, just about feeling frustrated with the behavior she was seeing in her daughter and the clinginess and the tantrums. And her grandmother just very like kindly, encouraged her to try baby wearing, or toddler wearing, and pointed out that, in their culture, and even for that mom, as she was growing up, she would have been carried around, when she demonstrated that need, and that was kind of the natural way to the grandmother to deal with those tantrums or clinginess.
So terrible twos shouldn't be sent to their room. Terrible twos should be worn on your back.
I would say probably that's what, the Kenyan grandmother would have said.
Interesting. I can't put him in a stroller.
Did I just hear a child?
Probably.
Is that what that was?
It sounded like something.
So,
That was probably the dog.
Oh.
No, I think Sai's awake.
So it doesn't surprise me. He's always up early. But it's interesting because she said, one of the things that she realized is that her daughter, if she wore her on her back, her daughter was better able to interact with the world because she was eye level. And so rather than like have to say hello or like say thank you, like the daughter was just instinctively talking to people out in the world because she could see what was going on, and she was not like looking up at people and different
looking
things
all these
like
kneecaps.
Right. Like she could actually interact with them face to face.
Yeah.
And so she saw a huge increase in independence and interaction with what was going on around her because her daughter was able to be up.
Makes sense. And I think for Kenzie, she was in a weird spot when she got diagnosed anyway. And so it was, it was just easier to keep carrying her and walk around.
And I think, it is something that like if I see a big kid on a parent's back and they're not like hiking or doing something like that, I'm sort of like, that's kind of.
Well, and I always say like 4 or 5 is about my limit for wanting to carry a child on my shoulders or going through a hike anyway.
Yeah.
So I know I've carried Adrian Saya like that. And, a few minutes is fine, but I can't go the whole, distance of the park or something.
Yeah.
So.
But I think that it's a really cool thing to at least consider, that if your child is becoming clingy or having tantrums or asking to be carried or to snuggle, maybe this is a way to address that rather than having to like sit down every, hour to spend 10 minutes snuggling, which I've had to do with Kenzie. You could still get stuff done and interact with them by them being on your back, and address whatever that need is that they're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, if you're capable of carrying them on your back.
Right. Because kids aren't always able to say, like, I'm really feeling insecure or I'm feeling, lonely or whatever. But that doesn't mean they don't have those feelings.
Right.
They're very immaturely developed feelings sometimes. And so the way that they express them is frustrating and difficult to understand for us. But, toddler wearing would be a way to address them potentially, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, since I think I hear a kid awake, it's probably time to wrap this up.
All right. It was a long one.
I know.
Longer-ish.
That's
New
okay.
series.
It's
you know.
great. The series may end up being longer. I know our last one was pretty long too. So,
Yeah.
let us know in the comments if you like these longer videos.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gives us a nice opportunity to talk a little deeper about the topic, rather than just surface level it. And let us know your thoughts about baby wearing or using strollers. Do you like both? Is there one you used more specifically? And if there was a particular reason for that, what was it? Or anything else that's you want to hear us talk about in the future that you think would be interesting.
Yeah. So like, subscribe, comment, do all those things, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until the next adventure.
Bye.